Hey y'all, Melissa here with you today, and today's project may look really simple, but it's actually super useful. This is called a skirt sloper, and what it is the pattern basis to make any kind of skirt you want and to make it fit you perfectly. So we're going to be learning how to use your own measurements to make a skirt pattern, where to place the darts, how big to make them, all of those things. Join me back after the introduction and I'll show you how to do this. Okay, the first thing you're going to need to do to be able to draft yourself a skirt pattern is take some measurements. You are going to need your waist measurement, your hip measurement, your length from waist to hip, and the length that you want your skirt. Generally from waist to knee is how we're going to be working. Now I'm not going to show you how to take those measurements in this video, but I do have a link below to make sure that you're taking these measurements all in the right places. Even if you don't want to wear your skirt at the natural waist, that's where you're going to draft from, because that'll get you the correct curve from the waist to your hip. So go ahead and you're going to make this sloper to fit at your natural waist, even if that's not where you eventually want to wear it. You're also going to need some large paper. You can get craft paper, butcher paper, the back of wrapping paper works well to do this. Now I'm going to be drawing my skirt out in half scale so you can more easily see on screen what it is I'm doing. But your pattern is going to obviously be bigger than what I'm drawing because you're going to do it full size. I also find it's really helpful to have this type of ruler that's see-through because that helps you line up your lines. Of course, you'll want a pencil. I'm going to be drawing with marker again so that you can see more easily, but when you do this for real, you're going to want to do this in pencil. So the very first thing you need to do on your paper is make a line down one side of your paper. You've got to have a straight line to start with. And then this is where the ruler that is clear comes in really handy. So what I want you to do is take the ruler and then you're going to mark out from your straight line, you're going to mark out 1/4 of your hip measurement plus 1/2 inch. So when I'm doing this in half scale here, it's going to come out to there. And it helps if you go ahead and make this line, there we go. If you make this line perpendicular to your starting line, and then mark it out in a couple places so that you can connect your line parallel. And then you want to measure down your vertical lines for the length of your skirt. So I'm going to mark my skirt off at this length. And there you go. You can see I've got a rectangle here. Now the next thing I want to mark is I want to come from the top line down and I want to mark out the waist to hip length out on my skirt. So in my half scale drawing here, it's going to be this amount, and then I'll connect my lines. And this is my hip line here. Now up on top here on the waist line, you want to come in the amount of your waist plus 1/2 inch. So for the purposes of this drawing, it's going to come out to there. Then you want to draw a curved line to get out to your hip. So what I generally do is I kind of go diagonal until I get about halfway down and then I start curving it. You can also use a French curve to draw this line, but that's another ruler you would have to buy. And I find that when I use a French curve, sometimes it actually curves it more than I need when I do it freehand. So this is the basic shape of your skirt to start with. And then what you're going to want to do is add a seam allowance to the side, to the center back, and cut this out of muslin so that we can figure out where the darts are going to go and how wide those darts are going to be. And we're going to switch camera views here so that I can show you a muslin that I have sewn up for my dress form, so I can show you how to figure out what alterations this pattern needs to actually fit the body that it is intended to go on. Okay, for this portion of the skirt fitting process, it's a good idea to have a friend if at all possible. You can do it yourself, but it's not easy. So the first thing that you'll notice is that when I sew this up, because of those extra ½ inches we added to the pattern, I've got extra in the front around the waist. That's as it's supposed to be, because that's where we're going to smooth it out and make a dart. So I'm using pins here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to align the center front. You can see the crease mark on my fabric there. Align that with the center of your body, or in this case it's centered on my dress form. And then you want to find the place where your tummy just starts to curve out towards your sides. That's where you're going to want the dart to be placed. And you're going to smooth and pinch that fabric in and pin it. Now the front is actually easier, I think, to do on yourself than to have somebody else do, because it's easier for you to look down and see that point where your stomach is starting to curve out to the sides. So you want to go ahead and pinch that amount out, and okay, most women have a tummy that's going to curve out and then kind of stick out and then start reducing back in. So you wouldn't need the dart all the way down because it's going to come to the end of your tummy. Now this dress form is flat, so that doesn't happen, but approximately here is where the dart would end. And on my body, when I'm wearing this and fitting it on myself, what I like to do is go ahead and just take a pencil and kind of mark a line where the dart is not needed anymore, because my body has started to widen out from my hips and the lower part of my belly. Do the same thing on the other side. You're going to try to find that spot where your body is starting to curve out to the side and go ahead and pin in a little dart there. And mark where you think that dart should end. You'll notice that on this side, the fabric smoothed out much easier and the dart is higher than here. That's okay. If your body is not symmetrical, you might want to do that. In this case, I think what I've done is I've pulled too much fabric from the back there, and probably I want to repin that. There we go. And put it here. And I'll measure both of these distances on each side. We'll get back to that when we go back to the pattern. Alright, same thing needs to happen in the back. So in the back here, I've sewn this with the seam allowance to the outside so that I could pin this down the back without having to put a zipper or anything to fasten it. And then you want to do the same thing where you're looking for the point where the bum starts to curve out towards the side. That last little bit of curve before it starts going to the side. And that's where you want the dart placed. And you're going to pinch it in and you're going to pin it. Now, if you do this standing in a mirror and trying to pin in your back, it's possible. It's not easy. I've done it. It's easier when I can explain to my husband what I want him to pin and have him do it. Or again, like I said, any friend that you can get over that is willing to help you out with your skirt, that's more helpful. And then the same thing, if I'm looking at this from the side, I don't want the dart to go down beyond where the butt hits its widest point. So that's about where I'll mark the end of the dart, kind of like I did on the front. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You can see this is the side where I was pulling too much fabric from the back and ending up with that front dart that went too low. So once I get that straightened out, I'm going to smooth and pin where I want that back dart to be. And I'm going to mark approximately where I think the bottom of it should go. One last thing you might notice here. This seems to have hip flares on it. That's another really common thing, and it's because you've been adding that additional width to the pattern, and you may not actually need that much width around the hips there. Remember, we added a 1/2 inch, which when it's doubled, that's an inch on each side, so the front and the back. So I've sewn this with 1/2 inch seams because I added the 1/2 inch seam allowances onto this. But what I want to do now is go in with pins, and you can do this on yourself, and just take out that extra flare and conform it to the actual body here. I do want to make sure, and use a mirror when you're doing this on yourself, make sure that you're still keeping this seam centered on the side of the body. You don't want it coming too far to the front or too far to the back. You just want to be pulling that fabric smoothly over the hip there. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay, one other advantage to doing this on yourself, once you've got it kind of pinned in place, you can make sure that you haven't pinned so much skirt out that you can't walk. And go ahead and try to walk to make sure that the skirt is wide enough at the bottom for you to take a natural step. If it isn't, we can slightly flare the bottom of the skirt pattern so that you can walk comfortably. But now that we've got this stuff on here, I'm going to unpin this, take it off the mannequin, and we're going to head back to the table so you can see how I'm going to put these markings onto the paper pattern. Alright, back at the table with our muslin. The first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and mark each of my darts on the actual muslin fabric. I'm going to mark where the pins are pinning. And I'm just going to do that at the top of each dart, because what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to measure these darts. I'm going to do the same thing for the back darts, just marking where the pin is. Once I've got those marks made, I can go ahead and take the pins out, and we're going to start with the back of the skirt here, because that's what I'm looking at. And what I want to do is I want to first measure the distance from the center back to the center of that dart. So I do need to determine where's the center of that dart. And this dart is about 1 inch wide. So if I mark halfway between those 2 points, then I can measure and see that from center back to the middle of my dart is 3 3/4 inches on this side. Now I need to measure the same thing on the other side. So on the other side, you'll see that my dart is actually a little bit narrower the way it got marked. So this dart is only 3/4 of an inch wide. I'm going to mark the center of that again. And when I measure from center back to the center of my dart, I once again get 3 3/4 inches. That was probably because I was doing this on the dress form. When I do this on a body, I'm usually within 1/2 inch or so of each other on the 2 darts, but they're never in exactly the same place. And that's okay. What you would do then is, let's say that one side was 4 inches from center of the dart to center back, and the other side was 3 3/4. What you would do is split the difference. There's a 1/4 inch difference. So then I would make both darts 3 7/8 inch from center back. But since these are both 3 3/4 from center back, that's where I'm going to keep them. The difference I'm going to have to split is in the dart width. So this one's 3/4 of an inch wide, this one's 1 inch wide. In order to make them symmetrical, I'm going to split the difference again. So I will have 7/8 here and 7/8 here, and they'll be equal darts. I also need to measure how far down the bottom of the dart looked to be when I was fitting it. So on this side it's 5 inches down, and on this side it looks like it's 5 1/4. So I'm going to make my darts, again I'm going to split that difference, I'm going to make them 5 1/8 inches long. So marking it out in half scale here, instead of doing 3 3/4, we are going to do 1 7/8. piece over, because that's the halfway point when we're doing it at half scale. So I would mark the center of the dart there, and then I'm going to come down 2.5 inches for that dart, because that's half of 5, and this was a 5-inch dart approximately. Again, I'm doing it on half scale. On full scale, you do want to get those 1/8 of an inch in. And then I want to mark out 7/8 of an inch to each side, but actually I'm going to be doing half of that. So that would be approximately 3/8 of an inch. It's actually 9/16, I think. No, 7/16. Again, it's because I'm doing it in half scale. On the actual scale, when I want a 7/8 inch wide dart, I would go ahead and do the 7/16 and 7/16. The other thing we need to check and alter on our pattern is where we curved in the side seams here. So you need to go ahead and measure that amount, figure out how much it is and where it starts curving in. So on mine, it looks like it starts curving in about 5 inches down the side seam. And then I've come in about 3/8 of an inch at the furthest point. And you need to transfer those markings here. Now again, working in half scale here, so my measurements are not as precise as they would be on the full size version, but I'm gonna do something along those lines and just bring my skirt in a little more, and I would continue that all the way down. Okay, and then this now becomes my back pattern piece with the dart. Add seam allowances and hems anywhere that you need them. If you're going to sew this with a lining or a facing, you'll need that seam allowance at the top. If it's going to have a center back seam, you need the seam allowance at center back, etc. But that's how you're going to make the pattern. You're going to do the same thing for the front of the skirt. You're going to measure and mark in those darts, measure and mark out the side seam. Then you want to lay your front and back pieces on top of each other and make sure that your side seams match and so on. And then let me cut this out and I'll show you how we can take this and make it into other styles of skirts. Okay, let's talk about how to use a skirt sloper to make different variations on the skirt pattern. So what this will get you is a basic skirt, and let's say you want to sew this skirt with a facing. Let me show you how to draft the facing. What you would do is you take your sloper and you would go ahead and trace off the top part of it here, tracing into that dart. And you would of course measure a straight line across of where you're tracing to, but I'm eyeballing it pretty closely here. And then what you would want to do with those pieces is cut them out, including cutting out that dart. And then we would tape those together there. And this would be the skirt facing piece. So this is the center front of the skirt, and what we have here will match once the dart is sewn in. It would be the same, oops, you can see it's the same pieces. So that's just curved without that dart sewn into it, because the facing doesn't need to go all the way down to shape around the bum or the tummy. Similar fashion, if you wanted to draft an A-line skirt that did not have a dart in it, what you would do, I'm going to trace around the front of my skirt piece here, and I'm going to stop at that dart and just trace the one side of it. Then I'm going to rotate the skirt. I'm going to line up the other side of the dart with my line, and you can see how this then creates that A-line curved waistband. Bring it down here, and that would be my A-line skirt pattern. Okay, I've just closed out that dart, and then I would cut those out. Let's say you wanted to make a stretch knit version of this skirt, where you don't need the dart because it's going to stretch to fit. Then what you do is you're going to trace around, And you're going to move this over the amount of the dart width at the top, but you're going to keep the bottom corner aligned. And now I've got, this is a knit skirt pattern because I don't need that dart because this part's going to stretch to fit over the places that I need it to fit. And you can see how it's narrower because I just need that to fit at the waist. So as you can see, there are many, many variations that you can make with this kind of sloper, and then you trace out what you want, you add your seam allowances to your final thing, and you sew up whatever kind of skirt you're looking for.